Welcome to Cooking the Books. I'm Frances Cook. Budget. Do you just get a shiver down your spine? Immediately clutch your takeaway coffee cup a little closer to your chest? Have a vision of yourself sitting on the couch on a Friday night, watching your friends on social media having fun without you? To say budgeting has an image problem is an understatement. It's actually the key to feeling happy with our money, and often the key to getting those things in life that really will make us happy. Far from cutting out what we enjoy, I am a strong believer that a good budget is about figuring out what you need, what you want, and then stopping all the other little things that could get in the way of that. But I admit it can be easier said than done. We're also sometimes our own worst enemies on this. When it comes time to sit down and thrash it out, it can be tempting to write down the perfect budget for the person we want to be. But we have to be honest with ourselves, or it just won't work. So, how do you write a good budget that not only doesn't make you hate life, but maybe even helps you enjoy it a little more?
News Talk ZB presents Cooking the Books with Frances Cook.
I'm joined now by Jason Leong from Pocketsmith. Now, often the core of everything else we do with our money, it relies on a budget. Really, the foundation of everything is creating this gap between how much you earn and how much you spend, and all of the investing, buying a house, paying off debt. It happens in that gap, but people don't seem to love budgeting, partly because I think they think of it as having to give up things that they enjoy. So, how do you figure out what your priorities are for a budget and how to make space for those in a healthy, slightly more enjoyable way?
I think a really neat way of figuring out those priorities is to look for some pain points in your life. And that's something that came up in conversation with my wife recently. When thinking about what some of those frustrating things are in your lifestyle right now, and isolating that from the stuff that you'd like to have. So maybe your car keeps breaking down and you can't get to work on time, or and so you might need a new car. So saving up for one might be your priority. Or you keep running out of money before your next pay period, in which case budgeting would be your priority. I think most people think that there needs to be a standard set of budgets to stick to, but really it's so dependent upon what you're trying to solve in your own life. So the whole idea of separating out what the pain points are from the nice to haves is, I think, a good way to start prioritizing the things that you want to budget for. And it's always because, again, we talked about this last time, right? Budgeting is not really about deprivation. It's more about solving a problem. And there's nothing more encouraging about budgeting than having it actually solve a pain point in your lifestyle.
That is so true. I often think with so much of money, right? You do have to make choices. You have to decide what you want. You can have anything, but not all of it at the same time. And I think you're exactly right that a lot of this comes down to mindset, right? Of what do I actually want? And then once you've got that front of mind, what you need to do to get there suddenly seems a lot easier, surely.
Yeah, goal setting, I guess, would be a way of putting it. And again, like, budgeting is such a broad subject. If we were to talk to a selection of our customers at Pocketsmith, we would see that every one of them will have a very different motivation for what they want to achieve at any point in time. And it's important to, I guess, make room for what's really prominent in your life right now, and I guess paying attention to it. It's quite hard to kind of walk them out in someone's shoes or anyone's shoes and prescribe a way of thinking about their budget. But I guess I'm rambling a little bit now, but I keep coming back to the painkiller and vitamin thing. Just coming from startup land, one of the ways of trying to understand if someone's going to pay for your product is to isolate what a painkiller is from a vitamin. So are you making something that's really going to solve a pain point for someone, or are you going to make something that's a nice to have? And just having a real, just keeping that in mind. What are some of the things that are materially going to make your life better? And then starting with those, don't budget for everything in your life because that's going to be a bit of a drag, and then work out from there.
Yeah, it's interesting there that you mentioned about, budgeting for everything in your life. I remember, I mean, my husband is one of those people who loves a spreadsheet, loves an Excel spreadsheet, will even like put in the equations. I have never worked out Excel equations. They terrify me. But he does all of that. And way back when we were still just dating, he tried to help me out with a budget. I had asked him to, he wasn't being a jerk. And so he budgeted everything for me. He was like, how much do you want to spend on coffee? How much you spend on petrol? How much you spend on your groceries? And it was like, some of it was like down to the cent. And
Wow.
at the end of it, I was like, that looks great. And I never opened it again because it was too much.
Right.
And where I've ended up since then is I chunk my money. I'm totally the opposite end of things. I'm like, I have X amount of dollars and that's my social money. I have X amount of dollars that goes to my bills. And I have X amount of money that's savings and investing. It can be split however I want. And I think it's literally just the three chunks. I've been doing it on autopilot for so long now, it just happens. But it's totally the opposite end of things. And I think there is a big spectrum of what can work for people. I mean, what do you think? How nitty gritty should we get with this?
I love that story because it's a very clear example of how a system can be so good and yet it's really hard to adopt. And it was probably the perfect spreadsheet, particularly if it broke it down to the decimal points. I mean, we love this because I think, first of all, you need to understand why you need the detail. And it sounds like from your example that detail wasn't really necessary, even though it was beautifully crafted. What we're keen to understand with our users is, what are you keen to find out? Because usually it's related to a problem you're looking to solve or a task you're looking to accomplish. In the conversations with our users, a number of them are actually motivated to start managing their money from an external factor. For example, they've been told by a friend or an accountant that, hey, you need to really track some of these things because there are tax obligations here. And that's kind of the inroad into creating a budget. But they don't budget for everything. They're like, okay, I might go to prison if I don't do this. So that's a pretty good motivation.
Motivating.
Yes. More so than let's stick to the spreadsheet. Some people have absolutely no questions about their finances, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. And if you have no questions and you're comfortable and you're tracking, that's also okay. Just it probably means that you're okay. You don't need a budget. So the level of nitty gritty will depend on the task at hand. And like some questions can be answered with like 10 minutes and a pencil and a piece of paper. No need to fire up a spreadsheet. Other things will require a system like PocketSmith, where it does the heavy lifting for you. You plug it into the bank accounts. It tracks your finances, gives you graphs and stuff. Others may require a spreadsheet. Some jobs just have to be put into something that lets you calculate some pretty complex formulas. I've actually got an anecdote. We spoke with a customer a couple of years back, and she is a spreadsheet guru. And she's like a financial wizard. And she had one particular job she needed to do, which was to file what's called an FBAR. It's a foreign bank account report with the IRS, being tax resident in the US. And at face value, what she had to do was a simple task. She needed to find the maximum account value in each foreign account for the calendar year. But when you think about it, it's actually like, well, how do you get actually the maximum amount you had in your bank? Because that's not something that's reported in your online banking. You've kind of got to download all of your transactions, put it into a spreadsheet, run a formula to then ascertain a running balance and find the highest value. She had all these accounts. So like every year, this job took 2 days to compile on a spreadsheet, brought her to tears. Then she switched to PocketSmith, and now it takes her minutes, right? And we've also learned that we're a great tool for FBAR, and we've written an article about it. But I guess the lesson that we learn here is that even like some of the most complex jobs you may think that spreadsheets might be the thing to use. It could be either or. You might want to take a step back and really look at a bunch of different tools that may actually solve it for you. So It's not like a linear scale where, like, as it gets harder, it moves towards the spreadsheet. There are always options, and the internet's full of weird and wonderful tools that help you get to where you need to be.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a really good point as well, is some people will enjoy that process of sifting through everything. Some
Mm,
people will hate it and can find a simpler system, but some people hate it and have to do that more complicated level of tracking. So
yeah.
for your system, I don't know how much customer data you have access to, but what sort of categories do you provide for tracking, and do you know what level of nitty-gritty your customers tend to get into?
They will work on, and we don't look into the customer data because we really put a lot of value in privacy, being sort of users of our own product ourselves. But we do know that they have a range of different jobs to be done. Some people come onto Pocketsmith using the Barefoot Investor system. So they've come in with a plan, and I think it's similar to how you might arrange your budgets, which is, there are different buckets of money, and then they tweak it from there. Others may come in with, they might come from other software platforms like Quicken or Microsoft Money, and they've got that system in mind. So that's a bit more comprehensive, and they will track just about everything that they're spending their money on. Others are just looking to track a specific aspect of their lives. It might be that the personal finances are going okay, but they might have a side hustle that they need to understand, like, how much am I making? Am I making more than I'm spending on this venture? So the key thing that we're learning from our users is that there are a variety of jobs to be done. And it does switch as well. So, one of the things that we like seeing with our users is if you need to pare it back, you do. We've got users who basically just clear out their budgets, after a couple of years and go, look, this is just too much work. This is what I need to understand about my life right now. And I'm just going to start focusing on this aspect. And it makes it so much more achievable. So breaking it, like, again, always taking a step back, understanding what the problem is, what the pain point is, again, to be solved, and just going for the jugular on that one. And it feels a lot better also when you're on top of that one thing. It gives you the space to think about moving on to maybe solving a few other smaller problems from there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting there that you mentioned about, people find they have different needs. And I also think the different personalities, right, quite play into that. Are there different personalities that you've come across in your work, or different mental tricks that can help people stay on track?
Yeah. So what we've learned about families, about couples, is that in most households, there seems to be what we think of as the CFO of the household. And the question we started asking our friends, our users, is, are you the CFO of the household? And the answer is usually yes or no. So Francis, are you the CFO of your household, or is your husband?
I would say my husband.
Right.
Yeah, I do not like running the day-to-day of my life at all. I'll sometimes absolutely be a jerk and refer to him as my personal assistant, which I'm aware is being a jerk.
Well, that means that you're the CEO of the household, and like,
don't tell him that.
When we think about sort of relationships in that light, we start to understand some of the dynamics and the different personalities that are in play when it comes to household finances. And it's kind of a wonderful thing, because we find that some of those household CFOs have they're not doing it because they love it. Some of us do, and others are like, look, I want to, I don't like doing it less than my partner does, so I'll step up and take care of it. And it's a lot to be done, right? Like, the bills to be paid. There's kind of the you've got to figure out, I guess, how to invest your money into different parts of your household, and keep track of where things are going. But the other part of the equation is that the person who isn't the household CFO ends up, maybe feeling a little bit guilty that they're not sort of carrying that mantle, and also perhaps that they might feel lost, or they're not contributing, or they're relieved. So there's the key thing about the different personalities here is just understanding that you're part of a team, right? and that everyone's strengths are bring a lot of value to the household. And so what we found is that communication is key. It sounds like such a cliche, but that actually is one of the hardest things to do when it comes to the realm of household finances, because there aren't too many established, I guess, ways of talking about money that appeals to both the person who likes the decimal points and someone who just wants the broad strokes. We've learned this over the years, and so in talking to our users, we've been encouraged to build a dashboard in Pocketsmith that lets people build the nitty-gritty dashboard. Like, it could look like the basically the control panel of a space shuttle, effectively. And we can also build lightweight dashboards with just the high-level tips. So one of our users absolutely loves this. She says, look, I like getting into all the details, but then my husband and my daughter, they just want the high level details, and I can make a dashboard that lets them look at that. And we're really excited about this because, and this is a feature that we've still got in beta, but it's going to encourage people to share those household finances in an accessible manner and have those conversations and a meeting point. Because otherwise detail can be completely overwhelming. I completely understand that. So I suppose going back to the mental tricks, one is having different tools or different approaches. And again, it doesn't have to be a software. It could be, hey, let's just get together and let me condense what's happening with our finances, and ask me the questions about the things you want to know, as opposed to having me sort of download everything onto you. The other part of it is for people who really aren't particularly interested in finance. I think it's I don't know, like a general trick is to find a hobby that involves some sort of finance. And it's not all that hard nowadays. So it could be a small side hustle that grows out of a skill. Like you're making a couple of bucks on the side and suddenly you're like, okay, I've got to quote unquote account for this money now, and I need to track that. And that's suddenly you're budgeting, right? There could be like retail investment is huge now with Sharesies and Hatch. It's never been easier to get into the stock market, and that, along with a degree of obsessiveness about what companies are doing and why shares are priced that way. So that's really nice inroad into it. Crypto, if you're in for like high risk, high reward, market's getting savaged at the moment. But finance is being memed so much nowadays. It's so hard to avoid learning at least a little bit about what's going on, particularly as it's so entertaining, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there are lots of little inroads if you just allow yourself to be absorbed into it. I'm rambling here, but like I'm so excited about where finance has gotten to now, from when we started the company 13 years ago. And you're looking at the news, and like GameStop makes the mainstream news, and people are talking about short squeezes and screwing the hedge funds. And this is like 400 level finance stuff when I was back at uni. And now all you need to do is log on to Reddit and see it in action. You have people talking about it. You've got opinions. You don't need textbooks for that sort of stuff anymore. Instead, you find a story and you go down those internet rabbit holes, which is just so much more intuitive. So there's so many avenues for being engaged with finance. And ultimately, it's why we're in this business. We love finance because it's really related to human behavior, to your motivations, to incentives. Mm-hmm. And we can see that what's happening out in finance is directly correlated with trolling, for example, like with GameStop. It's like it used to be dull because you never quite saw the motivations between what was happening in high finance, but now it's been democratized. Everyone gets a chance to voice an opinion and to put their money where their mouth is, and that's where things are getting really interesting.
That's so true on that point. I think it makes money so much more interesting when you suddenly realize how intricately linked it is to every part of our lives, really, and how you can use it as this lever that pushes change in other ways. And I think, yeah, GameStop was a huge one for showing that actually the little guy can, when they band together, it's almost like the unionization of the stock market. You can band together and force change. Now, obviously, it also went off the rails a bit towards the end, which I think was probably predictable. But it was a fascinating social experiment and really showed what can be done. I think to come back to what you were saying before about the CFO, CEO roles in the household, so true. And the idea of the communication, I think one person can be taking the lead. You don't necessarily ever want to fully check out of your money, even if the other person is taking the lead on making sure bills are paid or whatever. And to just use my husband and I as an example again, like I'm terrible at, I'm always thinking too much about work. I am not great at being checked into what's happening with the household, but we still will sit down and we will go through everything that's happened in the last month. We do, this is going to sound really nerdy, but it's actually so much fun. We have our net worth that we track every single month, so we can see, here's how much we owe and here's all the assets we have and what are we worth overall. The first time that ticked over into positive, being people with a mortgage, that was very exciting. And little things like that, where you keep talking, you keep communicating, and you find ways that make it interesting and relevant to you. I think keeping that conversation going so that it's not just one person's job in a couple, I feel like that's really important, right? Because when you're in a couple, the money situation, the person that you're with can either really help you, or unfortunately you can end up working against each other and having conflicting goals and both holding the other back because you're working against each other. I feel like having regular conversations, and the budget can be a trigger for that, it's really important, right?
Completely agree. And the household CFO thing has a sort of a dark side to it, that ages ago we published a piece about how too many households, too many couples have one person carry too much of the financial power in the household, and the knowledge. And it's, it may be fine when the couple are working together on it, but in the event of a separation or a death, one person's left out in the cold. Usually it's in separation. We've got friends in the financial services industry who've built products trying to solve this problem. And that's kind of the dark side of it. It's a swing all the way to like, hey, one person doesn't want to think about money at all, and the other person has basically all of the control. It's completely understandable, though, that as a couple getting together, that you're not necessarily going to have. I mean, the first thing you don't really talk about. The first thing let me put it this way: few couples talk about finance when they're first dating, right? It's not the thing that brings you together. It ends up being the thing that you've kind of got to deal with when you're sort of putting your lives together. My wife and I have learned this, through our own experience, in that we don't have joint finances, and we've never really planned to, because we'd like to have that independence. However, we had a chance to work on a project together, which was we bought an Airbnb. And that is a joint project, and it's really encapsulated what, what you're talking about here is having joint goals and thinking about your life together, your financial life together, any aspect of it, as a joint project. And for us, we're co-investors in our financial lives, which is kind of like what you're talking about here, which is, what is our net worth? It's kind of geeky, but the key phrase here is our net worth, not yours and mine put together. And that, if we can have that mindset before the budgeting part, I think everything else kind of follows suit, right? And much like co-investors in any project, or co-founders or partners, you don't end up having to split the financial work 50-50. You kind of, again, we spoke about this before, rely on different strengths. Everyone brings something different to the party, and that's what makes it so interesting. But I do appreciate how couples may feel that, all right, now we're together, we have to merge our finances. without really thinking about, well, how is this going to play out? Like, who's going to own what? And suddenly there's a pot of money. Some people may feel like they don't have enough autonomy or control. That becomes an uncomfortable situation to be in. And then you're going to throw budgeting into it. You end up resenting the situation. Ultimately, though, you don't need to make more or less money to change it. It's just about taking a step back and, I guess, looking at it like a project. I love the project mentality of it. It's just, it's so much fun. You just roll up your sleeves and say, okay, well, where are we going to be sort of next year or the year after that? I think the last time we caught up, we spoke about travel, right? And that's, that was one of those.
Those are the days.
Yeah. Yes, maybe sometime soon, maybe in about 3 or 4 years. That's a bit pessimistic, really. But that was like a small joint project. So, how much is a joint holiday? It's not a house. It's small enough to achieve, and let's work towards that together. And you can do that with separate finances as well.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think so much of this, whether it's a joint budget, a separate budget, both, you can definitely have both. All of this comes down to, you don't necessarily have to only budget one way. You can get as complicated as you like. You can get as simple as you like. You can share, you can keep it individual. Where you're going to figure out which one of those you want to do is going to be starting with, okay, what's the goal? So I mean, if I look at my really big goal, my personal goal is always freedom. I really, really hate being told what to do in any situation. My bosses can tell you that. And so I really, prioritize things like putting extra money on the mortgage, because the sooner I can get free of that mortgage, that's one monkey off my back. That is so much closer to freedom, Back in the days when we could travel, we used to regularly budget on, okay, do we want to go on a trip sometime soon? How big a trip? How far away? How long? Okay, let's start saving for it. And all of these things would come together. And I mean, we've actually, my husband and I have been together a really long time now. So we've had different levels of combined finances through our time together. We still have some individual money because, again, the freedom thing, right? I like to be able to go and buy a coffee, and it's stupid. I don't need to spend $6 on an almond milk latte, but I want to. And that's my prerogative. I'm a big girl who earns money and I'm allowed. And, he doesn't even see it. That's fine. That's my spending money. Whereas a lot more of our finances are combined than they used to be, because we are paying off the mortgage. We're making joint investments. We've got our own individual investments too. And it's, we worked that all out backwards from, what do we want? What's important to both of us? What's important to us from a money point of view, but also what's important from a life quality point of view? And me not having to justify buying a stupid $6 coffee, that's real important from a life quality point of view, right?
Yeah. And it's exactly that. Small projects to bigger projects, right? So, when we're younger, we don't have massive commitments. A small project is a minor purchase, might be furniture, might be travel. But then when we're looking at investments, let's pool our resources to make sure that we can have the home that we want and that we can pay off the mortgage and retire comfortably. That's not a single person job. So together you've got confidence in each other to then take on that bigger project and dedicate more of your finances to it. But also, both people have to be fully in it, right? Because you're both invested in it. One of the things that we talked about at work recently was just how, we talked about working backwards and quantifying, I guess, the milestones in which we take that next step. And it could be that in some relationships it's hard to see, but what we're finding that it's always important to talk to people about it. And I cannot praise financial advisors enough. Actually, the ones that I've spoken to are often life coaches who will first talk to either an individual or couples or families about those motivations. Where do you want to be, and what would you like to do? And that all comes before the financial setup and all of that. And you may go with a financial advisor long term or not, but I think that having that initial conversation about understanding what's best for you is so important, rather than, I guess, jumping in both feet and not really understanding. Other couples go with a predefined framework. So, I mentioned barefoot before, and the reason why I think Scott Pape's book is so popular is because it's a starting point for so many people.
Mm.
And it may not be so easy to unravel one's finances and see those insights, but to have a framework there and to have a good starting point from which you can actually build joint finances on is also really helpful. So I think, as always, like whenever we talk about finances, one of the best bits of advice is like, let's just talk to people about it, right? Talk to your friends, find a financial buddy, learn more, all that you can about it, and then try different things and work from there. Because I do wonder if there are people who might be kind of like, but what can I change? What's different? And it's always about having a little bit of external input that could just open a window, shed some light on what's possible.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think like we're almost out of time, but I think you've just touched on a really important point that I almost wish we talked about earlier in the piece, because it's super important, is that people often get this idea of a good budget is the most restrictive one I can, and it's only working towards long-term goals, only working towards things like a house deposit or paying off the mortgage or investments or whatever. And I think when you have those conversations with people, or even just start keeping an eye on your bank account more regularly, it creates a more realistic mindset. People are often scared to talk about money because they're scared they're getting it wrong, or they're scared that they're not dedicated enough to it. And so they go completely the other way and just check out. And that's my personal theory. Obviously, everyone has their own experiences. But I think if you are willing to keep an eye on your money more often, and even just keep an eye on your bank account and keep an eye on what's going in and what's going out, you'll actually start to notice pretty quickly the things that aren't adding to your life at all. And that helps you create a budget where you can actually be more realistic, and you can still keep the things that make you happy, like the little treats. I joke about coffee, but I think coffee is that people go on about give up coffee, and I'm like, it's the perfect small treat. You have to have a treat
You've got
somewhere
to.
in there, or you'll lose your mind. And so you'll see the little treats that you enjoy, and you'll see the
Yeah.
big treats that actually didn't bring anything, and it helps you make those decisions of how to stay on track. And I think talking to people and being realistic and keeping fun money in there in some way, I feel like all of those things are quite linked in, right?
Absolutely. And yes, budgeting, it cannot be about deprivation. If that's that feeling already, then it's probably not a sustainable thing. And it's probably quite nice to equate it to some of the other things that we enjoy doing, like chores, for example, right? I like mowing the lawn, not because I like actually the act of mowing the lawn, but I love what's in the periphery of it. If it's a beautiful day out, podcasts like 150% makes the chore so much better. And of course, the smell of the freshly cut grass and looking at it after the fact. I enjoy being out there getting a bit of exercise. But if I were to isolate mowing the lawn as like, okay, well, here's something I've got to do, and I didn't have any of those pleasurable things to look forward to around it, then I would see that as a completely dull task. So the same should apply to anything that is around finance. It's got to be, you've got to make it comfortable for yourself. There's a tweet that popped up, it's probably a couple of years now, but we remember it. One of our users had said, hey, it's like a Friday evening, I'm going to sit by the fire, pour myself a glass of wine, and work on my pocket smith. And we're like, oh, damn, awesome. The thing is, it's not so much the finances, but it's this person has obviously made a comfortable situation for themselves to sit down and do this particular chore, this task. And why not? So coffee is important. Like it's about making space to have those nice things. And so in order for any good habit to be sustainable, it's got to be fun.
Yeah.
So back to what you were asking about earlier, right? About like what are some of those mental tricks? It's just about finding the joy in these little things. Anything that amuses you about finance, about your own finance, latch onto it, and keep building on it, because that's the gateway, I think, into being a bit more effective with your money.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Hey, thank you so much. That's Jason Leong from Pocket Smith. Now, you might have questions about this podcast or anything else to do with money. If you do, get in touch. Send me those questions through on Facebook, Francis Cook Journalist, Twitter, Francis Cook, Instagram, Francis Cook NZ. I will try to get them answered for you in a future podcast episode. You can also subscribe to Cooking the Books pretty much everywhere you find podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Until next time. Have a great day.